So today I'm very happy to say hello to everyone looking this channel, Awakening Stories. And yeah, when you tune into this channel, I suppose you are very curious to find some answers. Maybe you are just curious to hear such stories, but most likely you are looking for answers. And out of my own experience, the best answers I got from listening to other people's stories, and especially to just feel like, oh God, I'm not alone in with this. I'm not crazy. So yeah. So I'm very happy to have
Michaela.
Michaela
Yeah.
with me today, and she's going to tell her story. And yeah, just let's start with you introducing yourself a little bit.
Okay. So first of all, Catherine, thank you very much for inviting me to come and talk. My name's Michaela Clarke. I was a yoga teacher and a children's writer, and I had been working for many years with a Santo Daime church, which is a church which uses ayahuasca as a sacred medicine. And through the church, I'll just show you, I was channeling this book, Tiger Thief, which is a children's book. And it was published in 2013 after many difficulties. And it was a very stressful time because the government arrested my church leaders and caused a lot of problems. And I received the information that I was going to go through Kundalini. I needed to find a way to go through Kundalini. And because I'd already been working with medicines, I got in touch with a friend of mine who was an Iboga shaman. And I said to him, I knew Iboga was quite a strong medicine. And I said to him, do you know if it could wake Kundalini? And he said, I don't know if it will wake Kundalini, but come and do an Iboga cure with me.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to Ireland. I went to the night before the cure. He gave me a joint and I had a puff of cannabis. And as soon as I started to smoke the cannabis, I started to feel quite sick and had to lie down. And that's when the Kundalini awakening happened. So I started having an awakening. My whole body started lifting up off the bed, jumping up like this. And I saw like luminous snakes coming up my legs, like bright colored snakes, purple, yellow, lime green, orange, like coming up my legs you could see the zigzags on their back and piercing my pelvis. And the awakening lasted for a few hours until I fell asleep. And that was the beginning of the journey. The Iboga cure didn't do very much. I had quite a mild cure. And then
What is Iboga exactly?
Okay, so Iboga is a sacred medicine which they use in Africa for things like to help people go through spiritual awakening and to meet with the ancestors. And it's a spiritual tradition called the Bwiti, which comes from Gabon mainly. And it's a root of a sacred tree which has a medicine in it called Ibogaine, which when you take it, allows you to go into inside yourself and to meet your ancestral spirits and to go through spiritual awakening. But and so I thought that this would help me with the whole process of Kundalini, but in fact, it was cannabis that triggered my Kundalini awakening. And so since then, this was 9 years ago in 2013, since then I made the decision as a single woman to diet cannabis as a sacred medicine. What that means is taking cannabis regularly as a sacred medicine in order to find out what it does and whether it is a sacred medicine and how it works with Kundalini. Because I'm not sure if you know this, but they've just discovered that cannabis was found in the temples in Israel, the ancient Israeli temples, and it was actually the main ingredient of the chrism, which they used to christen Christ with. So it was the sacred medicine. It was the burning bush of the Bible, basically, and the tree of the forbidden fruit. Yeah. And it's all over the world. The tree of life is associated with the snakes. So not just in the Indian traditions, but all over the world, there's this connection between the tree of life, the tree of knowledge, women, female wisdom, and snakes, serpents. So you have the Minoan goddesses, they're holding the snakes in their hands. And I think I'm doing research into it. So the oldest snake image is about 70,000 years old. It's in Africa. this great python in a cave that they found painted in the cave.
Wow.
So I think what happens is that the cannabis, I'm not sure if it triggered the kundalini. I think the kundalini happens spontaneously when it's a descent of grace.
Yeah.
And the kundalini rising is usually happening after you get the descent of grace, which is Shaktipat.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah.
had Shaktipat many years previously in a church. So I was in a church and the priest said, raise your hands and receive the Spirit of the Lord. And I just got like this, like golden light came, and I see like all these golden dots flying in and out of everybody. I didn't know this had anything to do with kundalini. I found out later.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So my experience was, first of all, I had the Shaktipat. Then about 10 years later, I had the Kundalini awakening. And then shall I carry on talking about what happened after that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened after I came back from Ireland, I was told by the shaman, don't work with ayahuasca for a month because the Iboga is still in the system.
Mm-hmm.
But a friend of mine who also works with Iboga said to me, if you had cannabis waking the Kundalini, you should work with the cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
So every week I was already doing ceremonies for the spirits of the dead with my church, Santo Daime, with a small group of people. And we were consecrating cannabis, which we called Santa Maria, as a sacrament, and
Mm-hmm.
doing a rosary and singing hymns for the spirits of the dead, for the almas.
Mm-hmm.
And it was when I was doing that that I started noticing that my body started doing kriyas, and I started having all kinds of like strange movements. And I realized that this was a kundalini symptom. I looked up kriyas and I found out this is what happens. You start having these spontaneous movements that are sort of moving energy through or
So,
realigning your
yeah.
body.
So were you scared when it started, or it's?
I've never really been a fearful person, so I've just jumped into all of these medicine ceremonies and stuff like that with both feet, really enthusiastic, because I just want to heal myself. Do you know what I mean? And I just want to come into my power
Yeah.
and be able to do the work that I know I'm supposed to be doing. So I wasn't afraid.
So of course now I'm very interested. What is your background? So how did you come into that church where people work with plant medicine? I mean, it was kind of early. Not a lot of people know that now it starts to come over. A lot of
Exactly.
people know what ayahuasca is nowadays, but
Yes.
in those years, I don't think so, right?
I think it's part of my destiny to be a trailblazer. So I was one of the first people who started doing Ashtanga yoga as well. So um, I, when I was 27, 28 years old, I was diagnosed with hairy cell leukemia when I lived in America.
Yeah.
This is part of the story because I actually believe that it's the same entity which causes Kundalini syndrome, which also causes cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd come back to England and I cured myself after having chemotherapy that didn't work. The doctors wanted to take my spleen out. And I said, no, you're not taking my spleen out. And I cured myself in 3 months using a book called Cancer as a Turning Point, which talks about the psychological aspects of cancer and the immune system, which wasn't known scientifically then, but which has been proved since then.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Gabor Mate has written a similar book talking about, called When the Body Says No, which is about how it's he basically calls in the book I cured with myself with the doctor Lawrence Lashan, who wrote the book,
Mm-hmm.
said, was looking into how the ancient people knew that cancer was blocked kundalini. They used to call it foiled creative fire. And he was talking about how they knew that the only way to recover, and he started doing this with his patients, is to find out what it is that they've been blocking, where the blocks are to their limitations, and where they believe that they can't do what it is that they need to do, and help people to come out of that.
Yeah.
So to cure myself, I started doing, I enrolled in a course designing furniture. I'd always wanted to be an artist, and I'd always been told that I wasn't allowed to be an artist, that it wasn't a worthwhile thing to do. And I still have that block that I'm still working on. But as you can see, I'm trying to.
Yeah, and your
Yeah,
book, I mean, it's amazing.
exactly, it's coming, it's
Yeah,
coming.
yeah.
But I know it's part of my healing to be able to do my work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I cured myself within 3 months. The doctors said it was spontaneous remission because they hadn't heard about this link between the immune system and stress yet.
Yeah.
Um, and I started teaching yoga in London after I finished my course. And through the people I knew teaching yoga, I found out, and I was on a continuous healing journey after this point, because I knew that the cancer was just a turning point, basically. It was just the first stage in me finding out what was really going on. So I went, and also I had a spiritual curiosity. So I went to my first ayahuasca work. Somebody introduced me to someone who was doing them in London. And I went to my first ayahuasca work, and my question for the medicine, my intention was to find out, does God exist? And if so, what is God? What is the nature of God?
Wow.
And I think I figured it out now. After 22 years, I finally got the answer. So,
Oh, let us know. I want to know. Yeah, please talk about what is your insight when it comes to this question? What is God? And
okay,
yeah.
well, it's quite a complicated, but basically God is what is our consciousness, which is arising through our matter. And they say God is in everything, but there is actually the way that our consciousness works is it's like a combination between our individual particle, which is ourself, and the universal consciousness, which is like the waveform, which is everything. And I think that the way it works is that we have these bacterial, we have bacteria, which I think is the prana in our body, is actually our microbiome. And then we've got this specific bacteria, which is shaped like a snake, and it lies dormant in your tissues, coiled 3.5 times. And that this bacteria wakes up out of dormancy when you go through times of extreme stress. And this can be, and when you look at the yoga practice, which they're using to trigger kundalini, they're things like holding your breath for 10 minutes, which mimic being dead. So I think it might be the bacteria that breaks you down when you die, that you're triggering this thing to wake up early while you're still alive. I also think that it probably does things as part of your natural life cycle as well. I don't think it just, do you know what I mean? So kundalini could be what triggers you to develop as a adolescent, and then going through menopause, for example.
Wow,
and I think that this bacteria actually eats through all of the channels in your body where you've got blocks, restores your body of light, which is your nervous system, and which holds your consciousness, your individual consciousness, and allows you to communicate with the universal consciousness by quantum entanglement once it's opened some of the channels in the crown. So I think this is an actual physical process which happens, which allows us to raise our consciousness. And also it can go into our cells, and it can rewrite our DNA. I mean, there's lots and lots of different things this bacteria can do. It's a shapeshifter, so it's really quite amazing.
For me, it's so funny because when I hear you talking about that, I haven't heard about this theory yet. So please let me know afterwards that I can put a link for people where they get more information about this theory.
I'm just setting up a website now, and I'm going to be doing I'll be doing a YouTube channel about it. So I've just I don't have a link yet, but I will let you know once I've got it.
Exactly, because you can. This is a theory where you need a lot of information in order to kind of come to a conclusion on your own, if this resonates with you. The funny thing is, for me, when I listen to you, out of my own experience and the insights I had so far, I don't have to hear a lot, and I know that it resonates. And especially because we were talking before a little bit to come into this interview, we were talking about like there should be a sign in the body which shows that you have kundalini symptoms, because we feel it in our body. So it's not only energy that is moving in my body. I feel like whole tissue package is moving when the energy is moving. So it is visible. And so this again, it resonates with me because, of course, kundalini in the end and everything, it's just energy. But here we are on the material plane, and it is it has to have like a counterpart where it is visible. And bacteria makes total sense for me, because we come full circle also there. It resonates with me
Absolutely.
because there, with bacteria, all the life started. So yeah,
Yes.
it makes sense for me. The kundalini actually expresses herself in this kind of form. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it's actually this bacteria, the spiral bacteria, they're called spirochetes, were the first bacteria on Earth. So
Yeah.
they created all other life forms.
Yeah.
They created the waters, they made the mountains, just like the description of God. So this is, do you see what
Nice.
I mean?
Yeah.
So I made the intention to find out what the nature of God is. And of course, God is the consciousness that comes through all of us. But
Mhm.
God is also, you know, described as the creator. And so if you're going to look for a creator, the science is already there. Do you know what I mean? That this bacteria was the first bacteria on Earth, and it's in all of our cells. It created our bodies. So really we're all, you know, when they're saying Kundalini can be dormant, but also it's awake all the time, it's true. But for us to wake up personally as human beings, we need to have awakened Kundalini so that it can open the channels and let go of our conditioned self, basically.
Wow.
So I have quite a lot of evidence about, you know, that there was a wonderful woman called Lynn Margulis who should have won a Nobel Prize for her work. And
Mhm.
she was the first person who mentioned the theory of endosymbiosis, which
Mhm.
basically is the theory that that evolution is a process which is governed by the bacteria, basically, and they working through us. So we are their vehicles, just like the Hindu texts say that we are vehicles for God,
Wow.
for the gods, you know.
Amazing.
Yeah. So
So,
I've actually got a photograph of the Kundalini, which is, you know, coiled 3.5 times. It looks exactly like the tantric images of Kundalini.
yeah.
And I found out that the shamans in South America, they used to deliberately infect themselves with spirochete bacteria to gain spirit allies and to wake their powers. So that's quite similar to what I think the ancient Indians and the current Indians still do. They do practices like eating corpses, eating, you know, body fluids and feces,
Mm.
swimming in rivers, which, you know, this bacteria is passed, you know, we're told, because it's linked to Lyme disease, we're told that it just gets passed on by being bitten by an insect, but actually it can be passed from mother to child. You can be born with it in your body,
Mhm.
anywhere in your body. So Kundalini can wake up from anywhere in your body, which is why people have such different experiences.
Yeah. Wow.
And it can trigger other effects, like things going on in your hormonal system or things going on in your nervous system. Do you know what I mean? So it actually triggers different things going on in your body. So
Yeah, I'm looking forward to read more into that.
yeah, good. Thank you. Well, I'm doing my best to try and get the work, you know, written up, because I'm still going through the process. And I mentioned to you before, I'm still having some physical issues that I need to work with, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, there we come to well, uh the next question is actually for me, what are your most dominant, were your most dominant symptoms? How is it today? And which ones were beautiful and which ones are very challenging? So,
Well, I'll give you a very brief
mhm.
timeline of what happened to me after I had Kundalini awakening. So for the first month, it was like a body scan. So I felt something moving up my body for a few days, for 30 days exactly. It felt like I was being scanned. And then it just sort of dissipated out of the crown of my head. And then after that, I told you I started doing ceremonies, and I noticed every time I used cannabis, I started having kriyas. So I
Mhm.
made a decision, okay, I'm going to use cannabis now as a sacred medicine every day, and I'm going to go through Kundalini. I had no idea it was going to take so long. If
Yeah.
I'd known, I probably wouldn't have done it.
I
Because it's,
was I was also so naive at the beginning. I was like, "Oh, cool. Ah, now, like, it
now
will,"
I'm going to be enlightened straight away.
and then it just
Oh dear. Anyway. So for about 3 years, so gradually I started using cannabis every day. I was smoking it. I started smoking it, and I was a yogi. I was doing lots of meditation, some yoga, But I had to stop my actual yoga practice, which was, I was an Ashtanga yoga teacher. So I had to stop doing Ashtanga yoga because my body hurt too much. And I also was getting the real strong message from Kundalini that it was hurting my body doing the yoga practice, and that it was giving me more blocks than it was closing up, because I was getting a lot of pain. So for the first 3 years, I just started playing with it and working out what the cannabis was doing. And I started smoking. I would make a beautiful altar, and I would smoke, and I would start having kriyas. I'd put music on, I would dance. And after about 3 or 4, but there were other things happening in my life. So I started falling out with all of my friends. I started noticing that I started not being able to put up with certain things that felt like abusive behavior among people that I had previously been friends with.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, and I was finding it really difficult living in London because there were planes going overhead and stuff. So gradually I just became a hermit in my own flat in London. I was very lucky that I had a work that supported that. Being a private yoga teacher and teaching a few classes was enough.
Yeah.
And I was renting a room in my apartment there as well. So I was really lucky that I didn't have to go to 9 to 5 work. I really don't know how people who going through Kundalini can do it, actually.
I have no idea. Yeah.
I couldn't do it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So, and then I started getting really interested in all these strange subjects, like receiving information, like about the Neanderthals being the gods, and cannabis being the tree of life. And a friend of mine gave me a book called Cannabis and the Soma Solution by a writer called Chris Bennett, which talks about how cannabis was a sacred medicine and was the soma of the ancient Indians, and also how it was used by Jesus Christ to heal. And I was like, this is true. This is 100% true, because I know what's happening to me, you know?
Yeah.
But then one day, about 4 or 5 years in, I noticed, I looked in the mirror and I didn't exist anymore. And without even noticing, because I'd just been removing myself from all human contact, I had disappeared. I'd wiped myself out. So the Kundalini, I think what happened was I had a left-hand rising. The Kundalini was coming up through the left side of the body. It opened part of the crown. I already had quite an open third eye, I think. And that's what I think was happening, because I was in the non-dual state of samadhi, basically. I think that's what it's called. So I no longer identified with myself. So I looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't identify with myself. And also, if I was watching people on YouTube, I couldn't identify with them as human beings either. So it was like I could see that nothing existed, nothing was real. And all of my previous spiritual beliefs about God and the angels and stuff like that just disappeared. It was like being completely empty. Do you know what I mean? I was completely empty. I didn't exist. Nothing else existed. And it was really free.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It was fantastic. It was beautiful. And I had many beautiful symptoms at this point.
So but let us know. I mean, you know, people are very interested in these kind of comments. And the only thing I just shortly put in, I was never in the non-dual state. I just can relate very much to you about every time, and I had these peak like falls of a lot of ego falling away in 1 second.
Yes.
You're different. And yeah, it's difficult to explain how that is. It's just a shift that is so intense that you look out and you're not the same looking out anymore. So what I experienced in these shifts is that for example, I watch a love movie and I don't understand anymore what the fuck they are doing. What drama? We're talking about love here. This is not love. This is bullshit.
Trauma bond.
Everybody tells me this is such a beautiful story, and he's standing in front of the window, and I think he's a fucking creep. He doesn't know how. You know what I mean? It's like, because you don't understand it anymore. How can somebody be so much in the ego? Yeah. And also a lot of drama happening around me. I didn't understand. Why are you triggered? Well, why?
It's true. You see right through all of the human behaviors. It's like you can read. This is what was happening to me, is I could read people's minds. I could see through their bullshit. Do you know what I mean? And I could also see through my own previous bullshit as well. I mean, it was all gone. My sense of self was gone.
Yeah.
So at that point, I went to live in with a community in up in Yorkshire, where I'm living now.
Mhm.
But that was
But
also
but but
difficult.
Michaela, just shortly, I really want to know now from you when you, because this is like the like a soft version of non-dual state, what
Yes,
I was talking about right now.
yes.
But how is it when you, I mean, people think then, yeah, but is that enjoyable when you don't understand, like,
It's fantastic. It's liberation.
mm,
So, I mean, and also at this point, I was introduced to like non-dual groups on Facebook, and I realized that other people who are also going through this process and who understand what it feels like not to exist. So
mhm,
I met lots of people who were in the non-dual state at that point.
yeah.
But so it's fantastic. So you really feel free. I mean, you're completely free of your previous self,
Mhm,
totally free of your sense of self or any kind of sense of self.
yeah.
But at the same time, you become really, really perceptive about what's going on with other people, and start
Mhm.
new, really interesting information starts emerging, and you become able to pick up really interesting information.
Oh, that's the point. I think that's the most important point. It's not like everything falls away. It's like the thing that obstructs the really important information falls away, and you have to learn to, yeah, to kind of newly live because,
That's
yeah,
exactly it. It's like a death and rebirth process. So I understand that everybody goes through it in a slightly different way, and there are different levels of doing it as well. So there's one person on the Awakened Kundalini group who's gone through it about 9 times. She's over 30 years. She's had a rising, something has shifted, and then the Kundalini's come back into her body so that she can like do a PhD or do something
oh,
else.
wow,
So
yeah,
for me, I knew that I was on a mission. So even though I didn't exist, and I knew that the whole idea of having a mission at this point, I knew it was ridiculous because nothing existed.
yeah.
I still knew that at some point I was going to have to bring myself back down. I knew it was a return journey. Whereas
Mm,
I know lots of people, they think about Kundalini just being about liberation. But
mhm.
actually, if you look at the Indian, the living traditions, they know there's lots of different things that can happen with a Kundalini. I've just got to plug in the computer because um, they know that lots of different ways of waking Kundalini. Do you know what I mean? So you can go if a so apparently a left channel rising, which is what I think I had,
Mhm.
because I used sacred medicine. So that's a process called Aushadi, where you use sacred medicines, and that's known to open the left channel and give you cities of vision, which I think I have, or claircognizance, understanding things. And then if you have a right, maybe this is what is happening with you. If you have like a right activation, a right channel activation, you become a healer. And then only the yogis who bring out the Kundalini through the central channel become completely liberated. The rest
Yeah.
of us have to
So
integrate what we're learning.
that's actually, I love it that you say that, because maybe I did something intuitively right, because, yeah, my right side is totally active, the left side is very numb.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, she's active here, and my energy arose without me doing anything. Well,
Mm-hmm.
not I didn't do any plant or nothing, it just happened.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But then, like half a year ago, I was like, there's something not going right, because my energy just always pushes up, up, up. She wants to go up, and I kind of hold back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I felt like I have to ground and to get the left side more active.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also started to do plant medicine.
Ah, really? Okay, that's cool. Huh?
Yeah, and maybe that was kind of intuitively right.
I think so. I think the
Because I
thing is, I
felt
think
like
that
I need
people.
something that helps me now. Yeah.
I think people naturally reach for the medicines or the practices which will help them. Do you know what I mean? Because there's so many different people on so many different stages of this journey.
Yeah.
Some people have an immediate awakening just in one night. Do you know what I mean? And then some people, like me or this other woman I've spoken to, it's going on for 30 years. Gopi Krishna, 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
So for some
Yeah.
of us, it's more of a full body process that goes on for a long time.
Yeah.
Perhaps because my Kundalini cleaning woke from the legs. Do you know what I mean? So
Mm.
it's there was obviously a lot of work to be done for me. I know I probably had quite a narcissistic personality before. Do you know what I mean? So there was lots of issues that needed to be worked on.
Crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot, it does what it needs to do to whatever to you, so that you can live the life that you're supposed to be living and do the work that will be beneficial, because we're here to be bodhisattvas. Basically, we're here to be a blessing to the world, and to help with the shift that's going on, not just the shift in consciousness, but my work is all about living in a sustainable way, being in harmony with nature. I think that's really, really what the
Yeah.
kundalini is trying to get us to do.
Yeah. So let us know about your biggest insights. Like
Well, can I?
about life. What is it also what is it about? Why I'm just very intrigued about why are we in a state of kind of suffering, and why are we suffering? Why can't we just be happy and liberated from the beginning? So what is the intention of that whole process? What do you feel like it resonates with you?
Well, basically, what's happening is that we're born with particular ancestral karma, which has been laid down of the suffering of our ancestors. It's called the sins of the fathers in the Bible, and they've just found out how this works. Epigenetic trauma gets passed on little viral particles on the sperm. So it's actually passed down from the father, and I'm sure there's stuff which comes in from the mother as well, but that's more to do with nurture. I think what happens is that these viral particles program your body of light, which is your what the way your consciousness is channeled, to
Mm-hmm.
have certain blocks in certain areas. And I
Mm-hmm.
think these blocks are caused by biofilms, which is there's a guru called Krishnamacharya who said that Kundalini was a block. This is recent research that has just come out, that it's a block. And actually, yes, it can cause biofilms, which is which are blocks in the channels in your body. So I think we become programmed with certain blocks, and these programs can be exacerbated by our own unconscious upbringing and the traumas. It's called the poison of conditioned existence, which builds up in our physical body as actual literal blocks in our physical body, preventing full expression of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And that the kundalini rises once we get too many of these blocks, in order to clear them, so that we can have spiritual death and rebirth,
Mm-hmm.
and so that we can gain our skills, siddhis, and our talents, in order to use them for the good of all sentient beings.
Mm-hmm.
And also because it's the agent of evolution, so it's helping us to evolve, not just mentally, but also physically evolve. So
Mm-hmm.
it can change our DNA and things like that. So and this is all scientific stuff that I found out that this bacteria can actually do. Uh, so so yeah, I mean, personally, for me, it's an agent of evolution, and it's to help heal us. But at the same time, it can, if we don't know how to manage the process, it can also cause real disease. So I see a lot of people who are talking about Kundalini and saying, oh, actually, it's just a really gentle process and it shouldn't be difficult and you should be preparing. But it's not really helpful, because there's lots of people going through it spontaneously.
Yeah.
And actually, we need to know what's really going on, so that if we do start having a difficult Kundalini process, which I have had, do you know what I mean? Then we should be able to know how to how to help with the process,
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes I also think I don't know. I mean, a lot of people. I just have this one life, so I don't know how it was before, because I also start to doubt that. I have so slowly I come to the feeling that actually I'm just, every person on this planet experiences the same kind of story in her own ways, because it cannot be that I feel like, oh, I'm in a time of a big awakening. Come on. No, I think every person experiences kind of, I'm in now it comes. And yeah, it's I think it's also kind of yeah, it is in our system. Also, you know, since the dawn of time, people are scared of the world is going to end, or the sky is going to fall on my head. That it
Mhm.
was always there. And now, but now we start to understand that it's not outside, it's an inner process.
That's right, yeah.
Like the apocalypse, it's not going to happen out here. It's a fear that comes from the dawn of time, which has its evolutionary purpose in order to catapult us and to be fearful of
Mhm.
it could happen. And then we have to overcome this fear in order to understand that it's actually something very beautiful. And
That's right. It is beautiful. You know, it's like, I think it was Vimala Nanda in his book, the book about Kundalini. He's saying the only solution is to surrender. You just have to surrender. She's the goddess. You surrender to her, and you're going to be okay if you surrender. You know, so that's
yeah,
all we can do, really. You know.
that's true. And that is also something, I don't know how it resonates with you, but what I came to understand, like for me and also a lot of other people I talked about when they had a Kundalini experience, is that it happens often through a traumatic event.
That's right.
And that made me kind of angry at the beginning. I was like, huh, why do we have to have a traumatic event in order to something beautiful happen?
Hmm.
But then I understood actually it's just our Westerners, because the problem is we are so closed, and sometimes the universe has to be kind of harsh, and also we don't know how to surrender. So in the moment when you have a traumatic event, most of the time it's not the traumatic event, it's the point where you let go and you surrender, and then it can happen. But it's just a surrender state that happened. You're like, okay, I'm going to die, and then so yeah.
For sure. I mean, and I think that this also happens in with non-Westerners. I know lots of Indian people, for example, who are going through Kundalini and who are finding it just as difficult to find anybody who knows the truth
Mm,
about Kundalini or anybody to go to. Do you know what I mean?
okay.
For good advice about Kundalini. So it's happening to people all over the world. It's just that it has different names in different places.
Yeah.
And in our society, unfortunately, it's being people who are going through Kundalini awakening, having seizures, which are not recognized as kriyas. They don't know where to go. My mother's a psychotherapist, but she doesn't know anything about Kundalini. My doctor almost threw me out of the office when I started talking about Kundalini. So
Oh, I know it's a stigma.
it's
Uh,
really difficult because it's really difficult to sort of find anybody who can actually guide you to know what's really going on.
yeah, and you know this that I felt that so much. I felt so isolated at the
Mhm.
beginning. I was ashamed. I was afraid,
Yeah.
because when you talk about it, people think either you're crazy or they think, oh, now you think you're enlightened and something special. And it's
Mhm.
so hard because it's not like to talk about another condition, like a broken leg. Because this is bad, and people, they are happy to help you with that. But when it's about, oh, I had a very strong spiritual experience, everybody, most people, they react with yeah, they don't want to hear that stuff.
Well,
They
it's part of the process, really. You know, before I had the Kundalini awakening, I read in a book by a yoga teacher called Gregor Mailer, who is an Ashtanga teacher, but who's written several books about the philosophy of yoga. And he actually said it's quite well known in India that the person who goes through spiritual awakening becomes a pariah. They become an outcast from society, and they lose all of their work and their friends and things like that. So this is quite normal.
yeah,
And Jesus said the same thing. He said, you know, to be his disciple, this is Luke 14:26, for anyone who wants to look it up for the exact words, is he said, you know, in order to be my disciple, you have to hate your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, and all of your society. And this is just a process that you have to pass through in order to unpack your shadow and to see all of your conditioning, basically.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be permanent. You just have to pass through experiencing all your negative emotions. And
But
so, of course, it puts people off, because we can become quite aggressive and also arrogant. I've seen people becoming very arrogant. Once you get to the non-dual state,
yeah.
you believe that you know everything. There's lots of people like that. That's what it comes across to people who are still in duality. It looks like you're telling everybody you know everything, when
Mm,
all you're really doing is describing your experience.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
But
that can be challenging for normal people who haven't experienced it. I really understand.
yeah, I also do understand, but still, for me, it's very interesting, and then you also understand why it's always so difficult to talk about these things. Yeah, but it's part of the process. That's true.
Yeah, yeah. I feel really grateful because I've been on the Awakened Kundalini site for several years. And, it was through that site that I found out the information that I found out, because I started having such strong neurological symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
So my symptoms, after I came up to Yorkshire, my symptoms became physically very, very strong. So I was having popping in my ears, popping in my brain, explosions in my brain, ticking in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
My bones were all cracking. I got TMJ, and I got meningitis, and one of my eyes dropped. I got like palsy. So I've still got some of those symptoms in my eyes now. So they're a bit strange, my eyes still. And that's when a friend of mine said, this isn't Kundalini, this is Lyme disease. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when I looked up the bacteria that causes Lyme disease and find out that it's a spirochete that lies dormant in your tissues. And I realized that what the Indians had been describing when they were describing Kundalini was the actual symptoms of this bacterial infection, which exists all over the
Mm-hmm.
world.
Yeah, and then again, right? It's so
Mm-hmm.
funny because people they tell you then, oh, you have these and these experiences, so it's just that and that. It's not what you think, it's just an infection or whatever. And that also strikes me very, very interesting because yeah, it's like when people say they had an NDE experience, near death experience, and then a doctor comes and they tell them, oh, this is just DMT starting to come out of your, and I sit there and I'm like, does that exclude one or the other? I mean, of course, in order to have this experience, your body does something. Oh
Exactly.
no, why? Don't tell me.
Exactly.
And it's so stupid because
Yeah.
then we can stop to talk about anything which makes us human. It's like when you tell me, oh, I love this guy, then I can tell you, no, 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 it's just dopamine. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, yeah, okay. Or I'm angry. No, it's just adrenaline coming
Mm-hmm.
out,
Mm-hmm.
So it's so funny. Why are we still arguing about this?
Well,
Is just chemistry in the body, and it's
I
funny.
think really it's because we need to understand that all the different things can be true at the same time.
Exactly.
So, I mean, this is the thing, is that this is what the issue is. Like, for example, I've received this information about the bacterial nature of Kundalini, but that doesn't mean I don't believe that there's not something also going on in the rest of the cells of the body, like the DNA in our host cells. Do you know what I mean? And the mitochondria have the same DNA, and so they could be part of the process. Stem cells also can be part of the process.
Yeah.
So, but the thing is that all of the physical information is being, the scientific information is out there now to
Mhm.
prove this thesis that I've had about the bacterial nature of the Kundalini rising. And I
Very.
think that it's just a question of those of us who are going through the experience just to come into our power so that we can tell our stories in a way that can be understood
Exactly.
uh, from a scientific perspective, because it's fair. And because a few years ago I actually presented my thesis to a yoga professor at SOAS, the School of Oriental and African Studies in London.
Mhm.
I had a friend who's a yoga professor there, and he was not able to understand my thesis because of his conditioning. So he said, don't be ridiculous. Kundalini is a goddess. And anyway, everybody who's going through Kundalini is deluded. That was his view. He didn't understand.
Crazy.
He didn't even believe in Kundalini. So you've got these people who are experts who don't actually believe in the thing. They're academics. They're not actually people who've been through Kundalini rising, you
Oh,
know.
they just talk about it as a kind of a story. Oh, the god is coming to you. But then when it's really happening to somebody,
Yes.
they freak out.
They disappear and
Yeah.
they don't know how to help anybody. They're just saying things like, I know, I've seen this, you know, I've seen many of my friends who are yoga teachers. They say things like, oh, you have to prepare before you wake Kundalini. I'm like, but hang on a minute. I know all these people who have gone through Kundalini spontaneously. They haven't had a chance to prepare. What would you suggest to them? You know, personally, I
Yeah.
suggest, you know, doing what the yogis do, fasting, you know, finding
Yeah.
special herbs.
But then on the other hand, I find it very fascinating how all these yoga people, they sit in a room and they're like, okay, let's start to wake up Kundalini. And then I think like, oh my God, if it's really happening now, what are you teacher are going to do? Are you going to freak out and think he's just having a seizure? Or do you understand that you just put
Exactly.
the work in there?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like, oh, it's just a fairy tale and it's nice to think about it, but when it's really happening, they freak out.
Yeah.
But I have to admit that my yoga teacher, he was very nice and he's
Yeah.
very experienced. So when I told him, he was actually reacting very, very
That's
nicely. But
fantastic. And
he comes from an old tantra
yeah.
lineage, you know, they know what they're talking about.
Mhm.
So yeah, but
Mm.
still,
No, that's fantastic. And there are lots of people who have, you know, have had Kundalini experiences. You know, I don't want to put anybody down in any way. It's just been a little bit frustrating because I was a yoga teacher. I was also one of these yoga teachers who hadn't been through Kundalini, but then my practice is not about going through Kundalini. That's
yeah,
my Ashtanga is not about going through Kundalini. It's a practice for householders, which is why I had to stop it when I started going through Kundalini.
yeah.
Um, but so I mean, I don't feel any sort of like anger about it. I just feel like it's my responsibility and the responsibility of all the people, not just me. Lots of people going through Kundalini are starting to receive information, you know, and
Yes.
it's the
Exactly.
Kundalini is giving us this information to share so that we can raise our consciousness. That's all, you know.
That's the point, and that's
Yeah,
actually what I really want to do with this channel, that we just
yeah,
come together, we tell our stories,
yeah.
and then slowly, you know, a picture starts maybe to unfold. And also I encourage the people who were already talking to me that they when they have new insights, just contact me and we have another talk.
Yeah, fantastic. That sounds good. No, it's great that you're doing this, you know, because it's really good for people to start sharing their information.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. It's high time.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
especially for people who really feel. I think that there are a lot of people who are very afraid that they might just had a psychotic breakdown or whatever, and they are. And for me, out of my experience, as soon as you react with fear to the process, then it can really go wrong.
Hmm, hmm.
So fear is like the one thing when it comes in, it can corrupt the process. So we have to kind of teach people, hey, don't be scared. Whenever something is happening, try to come into it without fear. When you don't come out of it without help, and also there I'm very factual, of course, when you really have like too much or you have really a psychotic breakdown, then maybe you need medical advice. That's not the point, but just let's first look at it at another way, and then it might be a door opener for a very, very important process instead of just
Well,
taking medication and making it go away from the beginning.
yeah, yeah. Well, it really does depend because I mean, I have friends who were going through Kundalini symptoms at the same time as me and who have been diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Hmm.
The bacteria which is linked, which I believe is causing the Kundalini symptoms, is also linked to schizophrenia and
Yeah,
cancer. So these
exactly.
things,
You have
like
to be
Sadhguru
careful.
says, you know, there are many people who start going through Kundalini awakening before they're 35 who die. So I think that this might be part of what's going on with many of these sudden adult death syndrome people.
Mm.
And I'm not going to talk about the right or the wrong about the vaccines or anything like that, but any kind of pharmaceuticals that you take will close your channels in some way. Do you know what I mean? And can cause issues, you know.
Yeah, but yeah, it's important to look at it.
Yeah, so knowing the physical issues which are going on are really, really important for people, not just to manage their spiritual process, but also to make sure that the people can recover from some of the dangers of Kundalini, because it's well known that Kundalini can cause madness.
Yeah.
Um, Swami Saraswati, who unfortunately was discredited, but has written a very good book called Kundalini Tantra.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he talks about how when you go into the non-dual state, this state of holy madness is
Mm-hmm.
well known in India to be a really important part of the Kundalini, when you've completely wiped out all of your imprints, your samskaras, and your sense of self. You go into this state of madness. And he said it's at this stage, people are mad. They're not, there's no, you know, you can't distinguish between that and schizophrenia. It's the same thing, basically. And it's only once you've made the return journey and you bring the Kundalini into the heart,
Rate it.
and you can develop compassion and humility and the ability to connect to people again by feeling like a person again. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? That you can
So,
start to manifest the things that you saw when you were in this really high state of non-duality, you know?
mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you don't feel it's worth it, you know, because you're in non-duality, nothing exists. So why bother, you know? So I
Yeah.
think it's really important for people to understand that for many people going through Kundalini, this process of liberation is only halfway stage. In
Yeah.
some yoga schools, they say you have to get to that stage of liberation before you even start learning yoga. You know, it's like
Mhm.
stage one of the process is to clear the old sense of self, and then you can start
Yeah.
learning the skills that you need to be you know, an enlightened human being.
Yeah.
So
Wow. Very
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's where I'm at right now, basically, is you know, I brought my sense of self back again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm working towards rebuilding my life and creating the work that I've been shown that I need to do. So I'm, you know, writing the sequel now to my children's book, and
Yes.
and
Yeah.
writing my book about Kundalini, and doing my
Exactly.
paintings and expressing my creativity, you know, which is
Yeah.
what Kundalini is
Nice.
for, you know.
So I slowly have to wrap it up, but actually I
Fantastic.
just want to close it with your story about the book, and it kind of came just to you, right? The book, and
The children's book.
yes, and also if you're fine with it, I will put a link.
I have no, I later for sure you can put links. I'm just by the 6th of December, I hope to have both of my websites up, because I've been living
Yeah,
in a cave. I haven't been
but the
communicating
book
with the
is
outside world.
available. The book is available.
The
So
book, so the first children's book is called Tiger Thief, and this was channeled with ayahuasca. It's about a little boy who discovers he's got special powers, and he is he's the son of the Queen of the Forest. So that's, and then the
yeah,
second book that I'm channeling right now, that I've been going through Kundalini to write, is going to be called Eagle's Gate. And
wow,
it's about how the little boy has to wake Kundalini to open his channels so that he can go into the land of the dead and bring back his gifts,
wow.
so that he can
Oh,
use his powers, basically, in order
no,
to,
but
yeah.
when you
So it's
say
all of the information that I received about Kundalini is going to be in the children's book, basically.
yeah, but when you say like the first book when it came to you, is it just the idea, or did it came with the integration process after the ayahuasca ceremony that slowly the story unfolded and you started to write it all down?
Yes, that's the way it came. So basically, I saw, first of all, I had a vision of the Queen of the Forest, and I saw the destruction of the Amazon, and it was a very emotional. This was in 2003, and I made a promise to help the forests in some way. And then I started receiving this story with the medicine, and I started, but it was coming in like scenes. I would see scenes,
Ah,
and
uh-huh.
I had to then work out how the scenes went together. And I was still very blocked. I didn't know how to do this. It took me 10 years, you know what I mean, to write the first book.
Mm.
And then I had various magical events. So I started teaching the producer of the Harry Potter films, and
Yeah.
he encouraged me to get a UK publisher. And then I was like, okay, great, I'll just keep going. And then I had Kundalini Awakening, and I've had 9 years of not being able to do any writing as I go through Kundalini to get the information. So
Yeah.
Kundalini is just like the information I needed to write the second book, you know.
Oh,
So
wow.
now I'm writing the second book, which tells the truth about what kundalini is from a psychological, spiritual, and physical point of view, but as a children's book, so that kids can understand how their body works and what their
I
soul's
love it.
journey is.
So
Yeah.
what about the first book? Is it available in also in translated
No, I would love to at
English?
some point. I mean, I think because I published this book in 2013. My publishers have given up on me writing anymore, and they've released me from the contract.
Uh-huh.
So what I'm planning to do is I'm going to I'm going to edit it because I started going crazy as I started editing this for various reasons because of what they did to my church and stuff like that. It was a very difficult
Yeah.
period of my life, and so I'm going to be doing on my YouTube. I'm going to have a YouTube channel where I read the first book, which will be linked to my website for the children's books. And then I'm publishing the second book, so people can listen to the first book. Do you know what I mean? So they can get the story, or they can read a précis of the story, and then they can move to the second book. So that's what I'm going to be doing, and I'll send you along the links to that once
Oh,
it's set up.
yeah, I would be very happy, and
Yeah,
I'm very interested in the book.
yeah.
I know when
Thank you.
information like that comes, it has a lot of insights. So yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, so Tiger Thief, you know, it was the start of the journey. So I was still working on it. Do you know what I mean? And now gradually I'm starting to understand more and more, and I'm becoming more able to finish my journey with it. So there's 3 books which are coming.
Nice.
Tiger Thief, it's a City of Jewels trilogy. Tiger Thief, Eagle's Gate, and Kalki is the name of the third book. So yeah.
Very good. Yeah. As soon as you have the links, send it to me and I
I
will.
will. I will. And thank you so much for inviting me to talk, Catherine. I really
Yes.
appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It was very, very interesting. And yeah, let's see how it goes forward. Maybe someday we will have like a group chat with some of
Oh,
the
that would be really interesting. I'd
partners
really
I
like to
already
do
had.
that.
Yeah, like with Natasha together. Might be
Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. And I mean, it's just so great that you're allowing people to talk about this and opening up the space for people. It's not easy sometimes, you know. I've had a lot of trolling when I've been talking about this, so it's not easy presenting the information that you've received sometimes. So I really
exactly,
appreciate it.
exactly. But I think, yeah, we're ready. And
Yeah, the world is ready.
it's very
Yeah,
important because,
yeah,
yeah, people need help. They really
yeah,
they
yeah,
kind of are lost and they search for help and somebody who knows what's going on. So
yeah, yeah.
okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Catherine, and best of luck with your podcast. It's a
Yeah,
great idea. Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you
Okay.
so much.